Durst the worst?
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst.
Oh, Durst the worst.
Durst is the worst.
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst?
Durst the worst.
Durst the worst.
So why don't we stop obsessing over the Ukraine-Russia issue that none of us know jack shit about, and none of us are qualified to talk about. And look at this paper here from this weird J-lefty Tara Goldstein from the University of Toronto, Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, Toronto, Canada. I'm not white. Anti-racist teacher education for white early childhood educators. So as early as 2001, probably earlier than that, obviously, they were going after your kids with the CRT crap. The signs were there. You just had to look, I guess. Abstract. Conceptualizing and implementing early childhood teacher education for racial and cultural diversity is a complex task that involves learning about social stratification and race, acknowledging the privileges associated with whiteness, and finding ways to create positive racial teaching identities. This article discusses 3 ways that teacher educators might prepare white early childhood education students for anti-racist work in their classrooms. So they're just brazenly saying they want to recruit early childhood kids to be like Antifa agitators who set fire to the liquor store. And yeah, like get online with Vosh and basically like rationalize MAPS, minor attracted persons, and pedo shit. That sort of kooky shit. But we'll get into that. There's a lot more. We'll see how far into this paper I can get. It's not too terribly long. But yeah, we'll see if I can suffer through this entire thing. 2 years ago, in one of my teacher education classes on racism in Canadian schools, I decided to place my students into racially segregated discussion groups. This has been done before, by the way. I forgot the name, but there was like a famous movie made about it. Back in the 60s, they did it. And they also did like a follow-up video. And anyway, I wanted to know if their conversations about experiences of racism would change if they had the opportunity to talk within racial groups rather than across them. If their conversations were indeed different, we could analyze why and begin a discussion of the challenge racially diverse classrooms present in terms of students' sense of safety, comfort, and belonging. So just total nonsense, woo-woo. That was just nonsense. They're trying to like trip people up to admit that they're racist or something. I don't know. It's kookazoid shit. As it turned out, watching my students divide themselves into segregated racial groups was even more interesting than the ensuing discussion. One white woman came up to the front of the room where I was standing and declared, quote, "I'm not white, I'm Jewish. I don't want to sit with the white people." Another fellow white student told me she was confused and didn't know whom to sit with. One of the white men started calling out, quote, "All Italians over here, we'll sit over here." This provoked the white student, who was confused, to call out, quote, "Any Celtics here? Anyone with Celtic ancestry?" The 4 black women students in the class immediately found each other and began working on the discussion assignment. The male student with both black and white heritage stood at the side of the room for a long time, watching the other students separate themselves. He finally made a choice about which group to join when a darker-skinned white man with Greek ancestry asked him to sit with him. So this is just like this Tara Goldstein delighting in just like having control over people and dominating people. She's just like observing these uncomfortable, just made uncomfortable in an academic setting just for her amusement, I guess, for her edification. A darker-skinned white man with Greek ancestry asked him to sit with him. 2 other white Jewish women joined the 2 men. Like the first Jewish woman, these 2 women did not see themselves as white. Wow, well, they said it. They said it. Remember that, ladies and gentlemen. Remember that. Remember that. Remember. Okay? Just remember that. Next time you see him bashing fellow whites, okay? The last student to join this mixed group was a white woman who had left the classroom to go to the bathroom because the activity had made her so angry. That's because she's being psychologically assaulted about, like, identity. You know what I mean? Right? Like, she's being basically psychologically assaulted about her white identity, and probably does not take too kindly to that. I think this might have been before they invented the term white fragility, but they have that term locked and loaded in the chamber for someone like that. Upon returning, she saw that a mixed group of students had formed and immediately joined that group. We had some educators from Japan visiting our classroom that day, and I had suggested that each of them join one group and participate in the discussion. When the Japanese professor sitting with the mixed group asked the last white woman why she was joining the group when she should be placing herself in a white group, the young woman became extremely angry. Holding up a piece of white paper from her loose leaf binder, she told the Japanese professor, "I'm not white. See, the paper is white. Look at my skin. It's not white like this paper. I'm not white." So what? How is any of this significant? I don't know. So what does she think that she's proving, except that she can successfully, like, make everybody in the room go haywire in their mind? Like, she's just, fascinating. I deconstruct people's identity, especially the white students, and psychologically assault them, put them in racially segregated groups, for my own edification, and they start fucking melting down and getting weird, comparing a piece of paper to race. I don't know, that's just goofy. When we came back as a whole group to debrief what had happened in the small groups, many of the white students started describing how difficult it was for them to even form a white group. No one had ever asked them to place themselves in a group on the basis of whiteness. No one had ever asked them to name themselves as white. Upon hearing this, one of the black students told us that she was amazed that the white students did not know where to place themselves. She told us that although she was from Jamaica, she did not go looking for other students from Jamaica. She looked for other black students. Being seen as black was as familiar to her as being seen as white was unfamiliar to the white students. Right, so they're going to try to paint that as, like, a privilege, right? Whites don't have to acknowledge their race, but in reality what that is they've had their identity stripped from them, right? How many times have you heard a white person refer to himself as a mutt? A mutt, dude. Like, okay, that's a race that's been just totally fucking deconstructed and deracinated and stripped of their identity. That's what that is. You know? This paragraph's kind of interesting. The interpretation, I don't know. I don't know if they'll get into any sort of interpretation, but that's... If I were to guess or venture a guess as to what the leftist interpretation of this paragraph would be, that would be it. Most white teachers have not been taught to see themselves as white, nor have we been taught to think of whiteness as being important to our work in racially diverse classrooms. In fact, we have been taught the opposite. We have been taught that color blindness, not seeing color or racial difference at all, is the best way to work in a racially diverse classroom. Many of my white students tell me, I don't see color in my classroom, I see people. There's only one race in my classroom, the human race. In holding up this colorblind perspective, my students believe that they are not participating in racism if they ignore color. Well, whites put themselves at a disadvantage if they ignore color because they ignore that they're being psychologically assaulted on the basis of their race in a classroom like this. You know what I mean? And with papers like this. I mean, as early as 2001. That's 21 years ago. This paper is old enough to drink. You know? So yeah, you don't have to confront your race, racial issues, so that's a form of privilege. You can ignore color, but you have the privilege of ignoring color, but you're still, potentially or definitely a racist, right? They flip logic on its head completely. In reality, those that are not leftist psychos understand, like, no, you have no racial identity, you can't think of yourself as white without getting in trouble. That's not an advantage, that's not a privilege, that's having your identity taken from you. Like, categorically, that's what that is. This article is about the need for early childhood teacher educators to help their white students learn to see whiteness so they can fight it, basically. So they can become like an Antifa junkie, arsonist, child molester. It argues that conceptualizing and implementing early childhood teacher education for racial and cultural diversity is a complex task. It is a task that involves more than celebrating, quote, heroes and holidays. It is a task that involves more than replacing negative attitudes about race with positive attitudes and acquiring a knowledge base about race and various racial groups. That was just a bunch of gobbledygook. I don't know. They don't want you to be stoked about being white. They want you to be ashamed of it. And they want you to attack whiteness. This is them like laying the groundwork for this stuff 20 years ago in academia. This is very fascinating. Citation: teaching white early childhood educators about social stratification and race, providing them with opportunities to learn about and acknowledge the advantages or privileges associated with whiteness and the ways that these, gotta scroll, privileges implicate them in the practice of racism in their communities, right? That's exactly what I predicted, right? Yeah, you're not allowed to see yourself as an in-group or white. Like, you have no identity, and that, to them, the lefty, that is an implication that you are participating in racism. So these people are just fucking evil. They're cultists. They're psychological assaulters, like I've been saying. Helping to find ways to create positive racial identities as white early childhood educators. Not as white, but like a white, like acknowledging their white privilege, even though there's really no concrete way to identify such a thing. But you could concretely identify, other racial privileges. But we're not going to get into that quite yet. Racism, race, and whiteness. Before moving on to a discussion of how teacher-educators might prepare white early childhood education students for anti-racist work, I want to briefly discuss how I understand the concepts of racism, race, and whiteness. Following anti-racist educator Enid Lee, I understand racism as, quote, any act or idea which limits, denies, or grants opportunities, services, resources, rights, or respect to a person on the basis of skin color. Oh, so being, like, denied, like, COVID treatments because you're white? Remember that? Oh, wait, but racism against white people doesn't exist. So, once again, this kind of literature is just a unilateral attack and deconstruction of white identity, and it's an attack on European-descended people. But we should just continue as far as I can actually make it, because this is actually grinding my gears. This shit is fucking awful. This definition is particularly helpful for discussion of racism and anti-racism in early childhood education. Again, with the kids, dude. I mean, they wanna indoctrinate the kids to be like Antifa terrorists and like into porn and fetishism and all this tranny creepazoid shit. It's not good for a healthy minded society, obviously. Everyday life in daycare centers and nursery schools is very much about opportunities, services, resources, rights, and respect. Writers and theorists have written about race in a variety of ways. Definitions of race have emerged from both biological and social construction. Once again, I draw from Enid Lee's work. Okay, social category. This is the definition of race. Social category used to classify humankind according to common ancestry or descent and reliant. Okay, this is just no duh. So they acknowledge that race is real, I guess. That's kind of based. Critical race theorist Richard Delgado and Jean Stefancic write that race to a large extent seems to be relational. Whiteness, acknowledged or not, has been a norm against which other races are judged. Well, I mean, whose countries is everybody clamoring to get to? These ones, dumbass. The idea of whiteness being a norm for judging others can be related to Lee's definition of racism. It is an idea that has led to the granting of opportunities and resources to whites, and at the same time it has limited or denied them to non-whites. Working with these understandings of racism, race, and whiteness, I now explore 3 ways that teacher-educators might prepare white early educators. It's just repeating the same cult mantras. This is like corporate newspeak, dude. That's how this reads, right? Prepare white early childhood education students for anti-racist work in their classrooms. That I feel like I've read that phrase itself like 5 times already, and I've only been like through 3 pages. Social stratification. This is just fucking nonsense, dude. I don't think I can make it through this, dude. I just wanted to, acknowledge that this stuff has existed for a really long time, and I wanted to highlight just, like, something that you may not have seen about academia, right? That they're just, like, they've been doing this cult indoctrination shit of educators and students for as long as any of us have been alive. I mean, the typical audience of my channel is, like, what would it be, like, 28 to 30, 40 something, 28 to 45. They've been shoving this down people's throats in one context or another for decades. And people have only really started to pay attention to the CRT crap, like, very, very recently. But as you can see, the term critical race theorist, they reference Richard Delgado in this in this paper. But I mean, take a look at this. Tara Goldstein is the person that wrote that paper. You could check it out. Just, go to, greatlakesequity.org/site/default/files. I'm not white PDF. Just check that out. As you can see, it's predictable as fuck. Ugh, look at that beak. You got all this, gay stuff. You got all this, something different is good just because, drag queen story time, probably, you know what I mean? Gender, sexuality, challenges creating gender-neutral language practices in French and the activism of youth in French language schools around issues of gender and sexuality. So there you go, just a couple months ago, she tweets about deconstructing the French language. As my listeners may know, I mean, if you speak French, Spanish, you speak Italian, there are genders to the nouns, right? There's he and she, and, different tenses and genders to the nouns. These kind of people are just straight up trying to, deconstruct that. These people. These people. Excuse me. 3 winners will be awarded $3,000 to produce their oh my god, pre-K to 12 practitioners, and will present their work. So yeah, they're convening on how best to indoctrinate your kids. They got QR codes, they got financing from big banks and big corp. Lock down your daughter's not what? Oh, misogynistic signs at homecoming parties, blah, blah, fucking blah, who cares? That is a mutilated pod person. New podcast episode, blah, blah, blah. Lee Ayrton, lead researcher behind an exciting new advocacy website, Gender Expression and Gender Identity. You are just, alien to me. I find it so weird. I mean, I don't know, I view you as just sort of like dykes, right? But, maybe not. I don't know. Are they real? I don't know. How to Get a Girl Pregnant web series. I'm sporting, wow. What the fuck, dude? That's how tranny couples can have babies. And then struggle. You seen that video where they were struggling to breastfeed the kid? Because we live in an upside-down honk honk clown world, honk honk. So, yeah, this person signs off on that. Basically just, bringing a kid into the world that's going to be traumatized by, proto-titties. Man milk. I mean, no, it's a she, totally. Drag queen story time type shit, of course. The mask. Because we're about safety, bringing kids around these people. But yeah, absolutely do not, phone zap or email zap this person or the university that she teaches at, University of Toronto, or at least did, I don't know, just 20 years ago. Yeah, absolutely don't phone zap or email zap this person. That would be anti-Semitic. But anyway, I've had enough of that. Peace out.
I'm hoping anyway, when music does come back, it's not going to be so much men, just people, just straight people. It's going to be a lot more, I guess it's you can replace the word man with end of white, what's the word?
End of
privileged people, at least
heteronormative patriarchy, whiteness. Yeah.
Shitbags, kick them out of the country. Shitbags, kick them out of the country. I know you got a problem with white men. I know you'll never fucking understand exactly what
Normative patriarchy, whiteness.